Smaller.
Oh, here we go. I think did it say that it was
You're
recording?
recording.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. All right. So it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Aimee Rose-Haynes. Aimee Rose-Haynes is a member of the Association of Professional Genealogists and a public speaker dedicated to helping people reconnect with their heritage and biological families. A proud citizen of the Cherokee Nation, she guides clients through genealogy, DNA analysis, and tribal research. Specializing in genetic genealogy, Aimee has worked on hundreds of cases, including adoption, unknown parentage, and complex family histories. She combines DNA interpretation with historical research to uncover identities with both precision and care. As a speaker, she shares insights on she shares insights on genetic discovery, identity, and indigenous genealogy, while advocating for ethical and responsible use of DNA in family research. Without further ado, I will now pass the mic over to Aimee to begin her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys so much for coming tonight. I love to talk about all things Native American history because there's not a lot of people out here talking about it. So I like to bring more awareness and kind of documenting your family history as far back as you could go if you have that Native American ancestry. So, unveiling family legacies, verifying Native American ancestry and your tribal affiliation. I'm going to shut my camera off so that way you can focus on my presentation. And so here we go. OCO, this means hello in my language, and those characters at the very top is our characters that were made by Sequoia. So this is the Cherokee language. We have the syllabary, which are those characters. We also have the pronunciation, and of course, we all pretty much speak English. There are not very many of our native speakers that are living. We are trying really, really hard to preserve our language, and so I always like to add this slide at the very, very beginning because it's super important to me and to our people. But we're here to talk about the Native Americans and who exactly were they? They were the original inhabitants of North America that were living here long before the European explorers had arrived. They all belong to many different distinct tribes and nations, and all of them have their own unique language and their cultures and their own traditions that have been passed down for so many generations that are still alive and thriving today. So the Trail of Tears, I always talk about this in the beginning of all of my Native American talks when it has to do with the ones that are in Oklahoma. So the Trail of Tears refers to the forced removal and relocations of those Native American tribes from their original ancestral homes to what is now called Oklahoma, which was Indian Territory back then. Oklahoma did not become a state until 1907, and so that area of land was named Indian Territory because where the government had all the Native Americans go and stay. So this was because of the 1830s Indian Removal Act from Andrew Jackson, our president. And what it was supposed to do was open up those lands where they were originally staying, opening those up to the settlers so they can have that farmland and to prosper and to live and to build their own wealth there and displacing those Native Americans and shipping them out west. For the five civilized tribes, here is the trails that they had taken, and you can see those arrows in different colors that represents a specific tribe. So you can see in the blue, you see Cherokee. In the yellow, you see the Creek. In the purple, you see the Chickasaw. In the red, you see the Seminole. And in the green, you see the Choctaw. Now, we think about this as a big like stretch of land. It takes you a very long time to travel by car. Like if you've ever drove to Florida or to Texas or wherever, you understand that it takes a very long time. So even if you're cutting the United States in half and that's the only amount of traveling, it's still a huge journey back then because they obviously didn't have automobiles. They didn't have a vehicle to get them there. They primarily did this on foot with just a little bit of clothes that they had on their back. This led to a lot of illness, disease, starvation, and deaths of thousands and thousands of Native Americans. They did not make it to Indian Territory. So many died. Like I said, thousands and thousands died. And here is a a little illustration that shows how many people from each tribe, and this is estimated. We don't know the real number of how many passed away because there's not a lot of documentation of who survived and who didn't, and who was left behind along that Trail of Tears when they just dropped dead and didn't have anywhere to bury their people. They weren't trying to document their people. They're just trying to survive and hurry up and get to wherever they need to get so they can at least try to keep breathing and eat and get settled somewhere. So the Cherokee estimated loss was 3 to 4,000, which is a mortality rate of 20 to 25%. The Choctaw, 2,500 to 6,000, which is 12 to 30% of their tribe that was on the Trail of Tears. The Chickasaw was 5 to 800, which was 10 to 16% of their tribe. The Muskogee Creek, they were at 3,500 to 4,000, which was 17 to 20% of their people. And the Seminoles, 700 to more than 1,000, which was about 15 to 20% of their tribe that they had lost just in that little bit of those few months going from one area of their homeland to Indian Territory. So I said a little bit about Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma. It was established by the U.S. government in 1834 for that relocation. The only purpose of this strip of land to be called Indian Territory, and they are setting up shop here, was just for the Native American tribes to stay there under that Indian Removal Act. So tribes like the Cherokee, the Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Seminole, and many other tribes, not just these tribes. There's tribes from all over the East, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, New York. All of these different tribes from all over the place were sent to Indian Territory. The territory was later opened up to settlers, and this was called the Oklahoma Land Rush. And when Oklahoma became a state in 1907, we had not only Native American tribes there, but we had other people there that were making Oklahoma their home. Here is a map of Indian Territory or Oklahoma, and here you can kind of see how it is broken up by how many tribes are here. There is a lot of different tribes here. I'm going to say about 67 tribes were forcibly relocated here, and many of these tribes are actually still here. Like they're still in Oklahoma to this day. Something to be aware of is federally recognized and non-federally recognized tribes. So you're going to see these words thrown around, and you may not understand the meaning or the gravity behind just these few little words. So a federally recognized tribe is one that has a U.S. government to government relationship. The U.S. government recognizes these tribes as a sovereign nation, and so they work together with funding, with different things to say that this tribe is somebody that we recognize. They are Native American. We support this. This is their own sovereign nation. So that gives them their own self-governing powers, like they can manage their own land, they have access to their own resources, and they also are in charge of their own citizenships. A non-federally recognized tribe does not have any legal status with the U.S. government. So they may still have their stories or their connections to each other, their cultural roots, but they don't have any federal support, and there's no sovereign protections for non-federally recognized tribes. Their citizens are also not eligible for programs or benefits reserved for those federally recognized tribes. So there's a huge distinction between the two. There's a lot of controversy within tribal nations with federally recognized and non-federally recognized tribes. A lot of people that are enrolled in a federally recognized tribe will look at somebody who is enrolled in a non-federally recognized tribe and see that as maybe they're not Native American, or maybe that they're fake. That may or may not be the case depending on what the tribes are. Some of them have been working a very, very long time to gain their federally recognition, and a lot of it is just bureaucratic limbo where they're trying to figure out what paperwork is needed. One of the tribes that went from non-federally recognized tribe to federally recognized just recently were the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. So there's just a lot of different things that can affect whether they are or they're not. So, how many tribes are there? There are so many different tribes in the United States. Of the federally recognized ones, there's 575 of them, and there's roughly an estimated of about 400 plus non-federally recognized tribes. Some of those are state recognized, some of them have no recognition whatsoever. Some of them have different ways to say, hey, I need to be enrolled, and here is my dues, and I just pay a monthly fee, and I'm given a card. So there's a lot of different things, and we're going to talk about that in the presentation a little bit later on to kind of help you give you a distinction of what all of this means and what to look out for and which ones to avoid. So today we're going to be talking about the five civilized tribes and who exactly are they? They're the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Muskogee Creek, and the Seminole. And this label was used by the Europeans in the 1800s because these tribes had adopted certain European styles and practices such as written languages, their government systems, farming systems, education, even the way they dressed and church. Like they believed in religion also just like the Europeans did. They adopted to fit in with the people that were coming into their lands. They made friends with the majority of them, and some of them they weren't really good friends with. Some of them helped them along the way and were adopted into tribes as one of their own, like William H. Holland, who helped the Eastern Band Cherokee. So that is why they were called the five civilized tribes. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 was what I had said earlier, had made these five tribes, and along with other ones forcibly removed from those homes, those Europeans made them leave, but some of them wanted them to stay. So, of those nations, these ones are continuing to maintain their sovereignty. They're operating their own courts and their governments, and they're still preserving their history and their traditions. And, like I had said before, their language that is super important to all of these tribes, how their language is preserved and their cultures are preserved. But not only do we have the five civilized tribes, but we also have the Intertribal Council of the five civilized tribes, which is those five tribes still. But they kind of linked up in 1949. They united these tribes to make their government stronger, to collective their voices on issues that were affecting Native sovereignty, their treaty rights, their education and healthcare, their land, and federal policy. That one's super important. So they kind of banded together to make their voices, instead of five separate voices, to team up together to be one powerful voice together. They work together, but these tribes are still their own entities. They're not one tribe together. They just work together for the common goal. They meet regularly to pass their own resolutions and joint statements and coordinate efforts on matters such as cultural preservation, the protection of their tribal jurisdiction, economic development, and legislative actions. While this is not giving any type of governing authority over each individual tribe, it's as a diplomatic alliance is the best way to put this. So we talked a little bit about a little bit of brief history of these tribes, but now you say, where do I search for my ancestors? How do I figure out if I am Native? I've heard these stories, but what do I do? How do I search it? What I always say is you need to start with yourself and with what you know. Your very first record proving anything is going to be your birth certificate because that proves you to your parents, provided that you're not adopted or something like that. Your birth certificate names you, it has your birth date, where you were born, and it's got your parents' names on there. So the next record you might want to look for is maybe who your parents are. So your grandparents. A record would be a census, a birth certificate, an obituary, just something else to get you one generation back. And I would start building backwards from there. One thing I also always say is geography matters when you are trying to do Native American research. Geography matters in everything, but most specifically in Native American research because you want to target your research. You don't want to be looking for a needle in the haystack. Remember, I said there's 575 federally recognized tribes in the United States and more than 400 that are not recognized at all. Spread it from coast to coast. If you don't know where to look and where to start your search, you're going to be going crazy trying to figure out where to look. So start with geography. Understand where your ancestor had lived, and that's going to tell you which tribes to target. So knowing which tribes lived in which area where your ancestor was, you're going to narrow in on those specific tribes. And this is going to save you so much time in research and save your sanity in the process. So here's an example. So if your family lived in southeastern Tennessee, that's where all your records are leading you to, and that area is known for the Cherokee before the removal. So making Cherokee records your primary source of searching to start is going to save you time instead of looking for a tribe that was in Washington or say New York. You have it narrowed down. Tennessee is where my family is. I know the Cherokee were in Tennessee, so we're going to start there, and that's where we're going to do our research. So this is going to help you save so much time. So another example is if your great grandmother was from Sulphur, Oklahoma in 1908. So this is after the Trail of Tears. So remember, the Trail of Tears started in 1830s and it went all the way up until about 1880s. So you know if you have a grandmother that was born in Sulphur, Oklahoma in 1908, you're going to be kind of looking for a Chickasaw connection. Those are the records you're going to start with. But if she was born in Toledo, Ohio, you know there wasn't any Native connections in Toledo, Ohio in 1908. And so that might be a red flag for your family legacy of possibly being Native American. So definitely use that geography to your advantage and narrow in on your searching. Blood quantum. Here is another controversy in the tribes. Blood quantum is a system that the government had placed on the Native American people to tell how native they were. So this is expressed as a fraction. So depending on how much or how little Native American they have, they might be 1/4, 1/8, 1/32nd, 1/64th. It just depends on how that works out. Each generation, that fraction is going to be half, which is going to eventually disqualify some descendants of their tribal enrollment, depending on what that specific tribe's enrollment criteria is. My personal belief on the blood quantum is it's trash. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. There are some tribes that they blood quantum out super early. So you could have a great grandmother or a grandmother that is enrolled, and then your parent is enrolled, but you've already blood quantum out. So even though you speak the language, you've been in this culture your whole life, you know nothing else but this culture. You maybe lived, if your tribe has a reservation, you've lived there your entire life, but you can't enroll into your tribe and be a part of them. You're excluded because you've blood quantum out of that tribe. I don't like that. I hate it, but it is what it is, and it's up to the tribes to either change it, amend it, or just leave it as is. Many people kind of see this as a tool for assimilation and erasure rather than a reflection of true tribal belonging. I see this as an erasure. You're taking members away or citizens away from the tribe that are rightfully should be there. So I talked about how geography is important, and now here we are with math. Like, how does geography and math have to play into Native American genealogy? But it does. It's a huge role. So here is how it breaks down. So if you have a grandmother who was full Cherokee, she would be 4/4 or full, right? So each generation, that fraction is going to half. So your parent, the child of that full-blooded grandmother, would be 2/4 or 1/2. You say that your mom was at 1/2, you are going to be now 1/4. And so for each generation, that's going to half and continue on. So if, say me, say if I was 1/4, my child is going to be 1/8. My grandchild is going to be 1/16. So it's going to continue to half pretty quickly. So if you kind of look at this, and if there is a tribe that says that that you have to be 1/4 or more or 1/2 or more, you can already see I'm excluded. I cannot be enrolled as a citizen into that tribe based on their citizenship requirements. We're going to get a little bit complicated here. So here is when you have two different parents that were Native American and how this works out. So bear with me. I'm going to go through this as easily as I possibly can explain this. There's a picture there too for reference so you can look at the photo. So your maternal grandmother is full-blooded Choctaw, so that's 4/4 or full. Your paternal grandfather, say he's half Choctaw, which is 1/2, but we have to simplify that fraction to match the grandmother. So we are going to go from 1/2 to 2/4. So now grandma is 4/4, grandpa is 2/4. Now we're going to go to your mom and your dad. So your mother is going to be half Choctaw. Your father is going to be 1/4 Choctaw. This is going to make you inherit half of your parents' blood quantum. So if your mother is half, that makes you now 1/4 Choctaw from her side, and your father is the 1/4, which makes you 1/8. Now we have to simplify that fraction. So the 2/8 plus the 1/8 is going to be 3/8. That's going to be your blood quantum. We're going to be 3/8 because we got that 1/4 from our dad and that 1/2 from our mom. Now, if we want to take this one step further, if I'm 3/8, that's going to make my child 3/16 and my grandchild 3/32. I hope everybody followed along with that math. If you are curious about blood quantums, if you go onto Google, you can Google a blood quantum calculator and it's going to pull it up for you where it'll do all the math for you if you have multiple places that the Native American is coming in. And this works for all tribes. This blood quantum calculator will work for every single tribe. And remember, I said that that blood quantum is given to you by the government. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs goes back all the way back into their records, and that's the number that is what's going to be assigned to you, what was first given to your ancestor that you're directly related to. So whatever they were given, the math is going to be done with that blood quantum generation by generation, and then that's the blood quantum that goes onto your citizenship card. The tribe also has a record of all of these blood quantums too. Now we're going to talk about the federal rolls. These are the most important documents in Native American ancestry and citizenship enrollment, all of it. This is the first place that you're going to have to prove yourself to. So these are the most important documents. This is more important than a census record, and we know exactly how important those census records are to our genealogy research. So they serve as a legal and genealogical record for tribal enrollment, for land claims, treaty rights. Many of these tribes use these rules, like the Dawes and Baker's rules, as a foundation for determining current enrollment. These people that are enumerated on these rolls were proven to be Native American by blood or by marriage. So these are the people that you need to prove yourself directly to be able to enroll into one of these tribes. Here are some examples of the federal rolls. When I tell you the Native Americans were heavily documented, I mean they were heavily documented. This is not even a quarter of the rolls just on these five tribes of where they were documented. There are so many different tribes, and you can see the Cherokee immigration rolls, 1817 to 1838. There were claims like 1838 claims, and the 1842 where they documented what people had lost to try to get them their money back for what they had lost and left back in their homelands that were taken from them. We have the Creek Immigration Roll of 1832. We have so many different records way, way back when. And these people are, for the most part, on a majority of these, named by name. There's a couple of them, it's only named by the head of household and then how many people are in the house, but majority of these are named by name of every single person, which is gold when you're going back way back in time. Because you know, in 1850, the census, that's the first time you start actually getting full names of everybody in the household and not just a hash mark for everybody besides the head of household. There are 30 major federal roles for the Native Americans here, and there's over 100 total lists of smaller or more tribe-specific roles that are also included. So over 130 just for these five tribes. When I'm telling you, they are super heavily documented, and you're going to get things like names and parents' names and sometimes grandparents' names. You're going to get where exactly they lived in North Carolina or in Florida. Like you're going to get all of these different specific things and a whole listing of household goods, like what they owned, what their house looked like, the improvements that they had made on their land. There's a lot of different information that you're going to get from these documents. I usually go to Ancestry, Family Search, or Fold3 for 99.9% of all of these. These are almost all of them are going to be online for you to be able to have access. Some of them are behind a paywall, and some of them are for free to view. There are a few that are only on microfilm through National Archives, but the majority of these you can actually get online. So here's an image of the Creek immigration roll from 1832 to 1839. And this was documenting members of the Muskogee Creek Nation who were forced or chose. There's two different here. Some of them were forced and didn't want to leave, and some of them said, you know what, they're going to take my land anyway. I'm going to go ahead and relocate to Indian Territory. So the ones that were forced or had chose to relocate to Indian Territory following the Treaty of Cusseta in 1832. This treaty required that the Creek to give up their remaining lands in Alabama in exchange for individual land allotments or removal to that present-day Oklahoma. That roll recorded the names of the citizens, their town affiliations, and their family groupings, and this was used by the U.S. government to manage their rations, to help with transportation and the compensation during that immigration process. So when I tell you that people, majority of people, like almost every single person that was here, they ended up getting on this roll because they knew that everything was getting taken from them and they were being relocated with nothing. just a few things on their back, some of them without any shoes. Like they literally did not have much of anything that they took with them. So this was a way, if they got on this roll, the government was promising them that we're going to make this right. We know how this goes in history. We all read the history books, but we're going to make this right and we're going to give you something in return for what we took from you. Yes, they got the land allotments. Land allotments were not the greatest in most cases. They were spread out all over different areas of their their tribal area of Indian territory. Some of them got paid, majority of them didn't. The rations that they were given so they wouldn't starve to death, they didn't get much of that, if at all, either. So this is the purpose of this specific role, is to compensate them for their land being taken. The Henderson Roll, 1832 to 1839, was commissioned by Commissioner James Henderson to create an official census of the Cherokee Nation citizens living east of the Mississippi River before the Trail of Tears. This had recorded about 16,000 Cherokee, along with about 1,500 enslaved African Americans and 200 white spouses. And this is listing their households by their head of household, their number of occupants in that household. So this one you're getting the head of household with males under 16, the males over 18, the females under 16, over 16 as just a number of how many were in their home. This was used by the US government to determine who would be removed to Indian Territory under that Treaty of New Echota of 1835. And it was a critical pre-removal record, so you can use this as one of the earliest most comprehensive snapshots of the Cherokee families in the Southwest before that forced relocation. And this is also listed by area. So this one says Guts, Floyd County, Georgia, Cedar Creek. So you can find your ancestor's name, the head of household. This one is a little bit harder to, some of these earlier ones are a little bit harder to confirm because you have names like Daniel Pumpkin Pie, House Bug. So you have these names that aren't Christianized names yet. They kind of get a little more Christianized as time goes on. Some of them took Christian names, but most of them back at this time were still using their traditional names. You always are going to have to kind of verify your information when you're going back this far. The Baker Roll, one of my favorite rolls ever. I love the Baker Roll so much, and this one is from 1924 to 1929, and this is an official and final base roll for the Eastern Band Cherokee that are in North Carolina. So this is one of your important enrollment rolls. So if you believe that you're Eastern Band Cherokee, your family's been in North Carolina for a very long time, this is a role that you have to prove yourself to a direct descendant on to be able to enroll. So this is an important role to remember. It was compiled by Fred A. Baker under the U.S. Department of Interior, and it lists about 3,100 individuals that were accepted as a legitimate citizen of that tribe. And this is, like I said, a foundational tribal citizenship. You have to be able to prove yourself to here. Not all Cherokee, so this is a caveat, not all Cherokee people or descendants are on this Baker roll. This is only for the people that were in North Carolina after the forced removal. So majority of the Cherokee tribe is already in Indian Territory at this time, but there's a very few that stayed in North Carolina on a strip of land that was bought by Mr. Holland. He was a white man who was very friendly with this tribe. He bought this land in his own name, and it was for the tribe to stay on. So the land that Eastern Band Cherokee are residing on today, the one that they're on and what was there in 1924 and during the forced removal in the 1800s, this is a land because of him. That's the only reason why they were able to stay, is they were living on this land. So to be an Eastern Band Cherokee, you have to be able to prove yourself a direct descendant of somebody on this Baker roll. Baker Roll, one of the reasons why this is my favorite is because they have these applications. And even if somebody tried to enroll into this tribe and were denied, like this person in this case, we still have this documentation of all this information. So whether they applied and were rejected or applied and were accepted, we still have these applications. So it has so much information on here. So here you can see that my name is Martha Fain and I reside in Cherokee County, North Carolina. I make an application for enrollment for the minor children as follows. She didn't list any children on this form, but if she had children, she would list them on there. We have an address, a P.O. Box address, Culberson, North Carolina. We have other information on the side that's written sideways. You can see that her application was actually rejected. We have all of this information. She's 39 years old when she made this. And if you were able to pull out the rest of this, it has her family's name on there. It has all kinds of information that you can use to verify more information. So if Martha Fane would have been your brick wall, you didn't know who her family was, you thought she might have been Native American, and you needed her family's information to prove it. Well, this rejected application that you pull for her is going to give you all this extra information. The Dawes role, another super important role, is for enrollment purposes for the five civilized tribes in Oklahoma today. So, like I said, the Cherokee, the Eastern Band Cherokee are in North Carolina. You would not use the Dawes role for the North Carolina Cherokee tribe. You would not, only for the ones that are in Oklahoma. So this was compiled between 1898 and 1907. Some people were still added up until 1914. Those are the ones that were in limbo. Maybe there were some appeals going on. Some babies had been born in that little time period that ended up getting enrolled after the family had been enrolled. So this is why it says to 1914, but 1907 was the cutoff date for enrollment purposes. This documented people of the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Muskogee Creek, and Seminole tribes that were living in Indian Territory at this time. The main purpose of this role was for land allotments. Like I said, they had been in their homelands, their land was taken, forced removal. This was the government giving them something back as reparations that, hey, we took your stuff, we forced you out, we're taking your land, but here's this land here. You can have this. This is your payment. So these roles, like I said, serve as that key resource for the tribal enrollment and for verifying your ancestry within those five civilized tribes there. And it determines who was going to be able to say, yes, you're Native American, so you're enrolled, or no, you're rejected, you're not allowed to be enrolled. The General Allotment Act or the Dawes Act is in order for those people that were part of that relocation to be documented. So this is what this is for, to be documented and for those land allotments. So you get a card. When you're looking at your ancestors, you get the Dawes and you're trying to figure out if they are Native American or not. This is one of the records that's going to show up. You're going to get a Dawes card. So this is for my ancestor, John Edward Welch, and this is showing a few of his kids. Because of these Dawes packet information, I found a whole lot about John Edward Welch, and we'll get into that here in a few minutes. You won't believe what you can find about your ancestors if you just read the documents that are here. But this has got a lot of information. So you have the name of the applicant, you have the family on there, the tribal affiliation at the top, which is Cherokee Nation for my ancestor. You have the blood quantum estimates that are on here. You have all kinds of information, where they lived, who their parents were, where those parents lived, if they were living, if they had died, where John Edward Welch lived at that time, which was Edna, Kansas. That was the post office in Indian Territory. So you get all of this information that you can start to build upon. So I like to do something called lineage layers when researching my ancestors. And the more documentation, the more layers of facts that I'm adding. So this is just an extra one of those layers of facts of information that you can add to your ancestor. Sometimes, like towards the bottom, you can see that number 3 on 1896 roll as Jesse Welch. So that was talking about his son. Sometimes gives you extra information, or if they verified if somebody was on another roll, sometimes they will write it down there. So you're like, oh, I've got the Dawes roll. I can go back to an earlier roll because it's mentioned here that this is where they are. So you're going to get all kinds of information. One of the other thing that you're going to get on here is their roll card number and also their application number. So let me pull up my pointer real quick. Let me get it up here. So here you can see this is going to be their personal number. So this number is going to be unique to them. So if you wanted to go look up more information from the Dawes packets, you're going to look. So Hooley here, his son Hooley, 25375. If you put that number and look for your Dawes packet for Cherokee, you're going to find that there's a whole packet attached for just Hooley and only Hooley. Over here is your family number. So your family number is going to be over here, and that's going to be attached to that number, everybody in this family that had applied together. So, just like with the Baker rule, if somebody had applied and had been rejected, they're still going to have information. You're still going to get all of the things that were on the DOS card for somebody who was enrolled, but it's going to say that they were rejected. And sometimes you're going to see why it was rejected. You're going to see if they were mailed a rejection letter. It's going to have different dates of things that's happened and so many different notes. But importantly, it's going to have their name, their household, who is in their household, where they were born, where their parents are from, if they're living or if they're dead. So you're going to figure out all of this information of the family. So you technically could have three generations of your family documented on this one card, even if they applied and were rejected. The freedmen. The freedmen is going to be the people that were formerly enslaved by the Native Americans. And they were held in bondage, just like with the white people. They were held in bondage to the Native Americans. And whenever the Trail of Tears happened, these African Americans, enslaved individuals, they were forced to remove with the Native Americans. So after the war, the treaties were drawn up in 1866 that required the tribes to emancipate all of their slaves and offer them full tribal citizenship. Not limited, not any strings attached, not any caveats, full tribal citizenships. There are a lot of tribes who are fighting this or refuse or giving them limited citizenship when they were based on this 1866 treaty. The freedmen, the African Americans that were formerly enslaved, and their descendants are supposed to be granted full citizenship. Right now, there are two tribes that allow that. That is the Cherokee and the Muskogee Creek. Seminole, they have limited, they do not grant that full citizenship, but there is lawsuits going for almost all of these tribes to grant them their full citizenships, which is rightfully theirs. Like they rightfully deserve and are to be enrolled, just like I am, or my cousin, or my grandma, like whoever. They are entitled to that citizenship. Cherokee Nation, they allowed the full citizenship in 2017 after a Supreme Court ruling. Before that, they allowed it. It was limited. They stopped it. They allowed it. It was a whole domino thing that went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But in 2017, and it was finalized in 2021, that Cherokee Nation is enrolling the freedmen citizens and their descendants. Choctaw, not at all. Chickasaw, not at all. And the Muskogee Creek in 2021, and they were granted that citizenship, and it was ongoing up until that Supreme Court ruling in 2025. So not even a year they have been able to enroll. So the freedmen, just like with everybody else, they have the DOS cards too, but theirs are going to be a little bit different. So it's still going to have their name, their household, where they're from, how old they are, all of these things, where they're living, but you are going to get this slave owner. You're going to get that name. And if you were ever researching African American history, I want to know who held who. Like, I want to know who held this person in bondage, and I want to know everything and try to figure out if we can find the families and all of these things that had been lost or stolen from them. This gives you that slave owner's name and where they were from. So you can go and look at that person's will, or you can go look at their slave schedule to see who else is in that home with them at that time. So these are super important documents, and African Americans way back when, they have very limited records about where they're from and their history in the first place. So I'm very thankful that we have these freedmen cards for these individuals to trace their ancestry. And just like with everybody else, there you have their rejected one. So here is a Cherokee freedman that was rejected. You have the same information again, their name, the family that's in there, how old they are, where they're from, where they're living, all of that information. And you have all of those notes on there as well. So you have extra layers of information to go and further research. DOS packets. I love these DOS packets too, because again, this is what people had said themselves. So these are the original applications and their interviews, their supporting evidence. The DOS Commission went to a centralized location in their territory. The people who applied to be in the tribe went to these interviews and they sat down and had a full interview, and it was documented. They transcribed all of this and saved it for us to find and learn more about our ancestors from firsthand. These are genealogical gold because you're getting those names, the grandparents, the children, the spouses across multiple generations. You're getting information about where they lived or how they lived. If there was some weird, like in my case, I learned that my ancestor, John Edward Welch, was a bigamist and went to prison for this. He had, I think we're up to 9 wives and more than 22, 24 kids. I actually just found one of his kids we didn't know existed in North Carolina. And we found this person by DNA about 2 years ago or so. Like we didn't know this person even existed. So we have all of this information. We know that he went back and forth from North Carolina to Oklahoma. We knew he went to Texas. We knew he went to Arkansas. We knew he spent some time in a prison in Michigan for a little while. Like we get all kinds of different information from all of these documents. We also figure out that, hey, we don't know if this person might be Native American or not. The Dawes Commission said, well, hey, we need to talk to a neighbor, a cousin, an auntie, whatever. We need to talk to somebody to get a statement from this person to verify who this person is that was trying to enroll. So sometimes you get those letters. Sometimes your ancestor wrote them a letter, and so you can see a letter in their own handwriting in these packets with their own signature. Like some of these signatures are from 1900, from 1905, and you can see these, and you may not have ever seen your ancestors' handwriting before, but it's preserved in these documents. You get also with those witness statements, sometimes you will get a photograph. I've only seen this in the Choctaw. I haven't seen it in any of the other tribes, but sometimes you'll get a photograph of your ancestor. You also will get notes about approvals, denials, if they were in the appeal process, any correspondence that the government sent to your ancestor. There's a copy in these DOS packets. So you can always find information here. These DOS packets also help you with the confusion of the same names, same area, to make sure that your ancestor is your ancestor and not somebody with the exact same name. Because again, like I said, you're getting this information of who their family is. So here we know that he's got a couple of kids that he listed. We know that he's got a couple of wives that are listed here that I can use to say, oh, John Edward Welch, that's a common name. There's like 20 of them, but this one is mine because I can verify the information of the people around him that are associated with him. The 1957 Seminole Tribe Roll. This one is used to identify the members of the Seminole Tribe of Florida that are eligible for those federal benefits under the Indian Reorganization Act, or the IRA. And this one is essential for establishing the tribe's recognized membership and determining who is eligible for land allotments and final financial compensation and other services through that federal government. So this is an important role for this tribe, and this is one of the roles that they use for enrollment purposes today. The Mississippi Band of Choctaw, the 1940s Census Roll. This is going to be a foundational document as well, and for tribal enrollment. So you have to prove yourself as a direct descendant to somebody that was enumerated on this roll in 1940. This roll includes names and ages, family relationships, and other identifying details, and became the base roll for that tribe. Like I said, you have to prove yourself to somebody on this roll to be able to enroll. Unlike other BIA roles, BIA is a Bureau of Indian Affairs that was compiled in later years. The 1940s census serves as an official reference point for determining who qualifies as a citizen of that Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians. And again, I'm talking about a bunch of different tribes here, but all of these are federally recognized. I just want to put that reminder out there. The 1949 United Kituwa Band base roll. This is another foundational document. They are in the Oklahoma also, so they're not exactly Cherokee Nation. They have their own little split of a tribe. So there's a lot of controversy between these two tribes of why are there two different Cherokee tribes that descend from the exact same people in Oklahoma. So long history between the two, and so they're just two separate tribes, and they're currently trying to figure out if the United Kituwa Band is able to have their own sovereignty in their own area and their own like tribal part of the lands of Cherokee Nation, or it's a whole mess. But separate tribe, even though there's people that are related on both sides, they all come pretty much from the same exact tribe in the homeland, so North Carolina, Georgia area. So this band base roll is from 1949, and you have to be able to prove yourself to somebody on this that you're directly related to for enrollment purposes. And there's other caveats to this too that I'll get into in a little while. In order for somebody to get onto this 1949 roll, you had to prove yourself to somebody that was listed on the Dawes roll. So remember, the Dawes roll was for the Cherokee. You had to prove yourself to somebody on the Dawes roll to be able to enroll on the United Key to a Band base roll. But not all Cherokee Nation people that were on the Dawes roll can enroll into this tribe. Even though they're all related, they're all connected, they're two separate entities. So we'll get into that here in a few minutes too. The Jenna Band of Choctaw 1995 tribal roll. 1995, that's not that far away in history. We thought 1949, 1947 was kind of close, but 1995. So the Jenna Band of Choctaw tribal roll is another foundational document, and in order to enroll, there's a few different rules here too, but you have to prove yourself to somebody that was enrolled in April of 1995 when the roll became final. There are about 157 to 189-ish citizens that are on there. It's been revised from the original base rule to establish the eligibility for people today to be enrolled. But to be a citizen, you must be a direct descendant of somebody that was put on that roll in 1995. 2008, and we're getting even more recent in time. So 2008 is super recent, but the Powash Creek Indians tribal roll, this is another one of those foundational roles that you have to prove yourself to be able to enroll into this tribe. So this tribe had amended its constitution to close those rolls effective of December 31st of 2008. And it was, like I had said, a membership eligibility role. You had to be a citizen, you have to have somebody on this to be a citizen for you to be able to enroll in a citizen. And in order for somebody to become on this role in 2008, they had to prove themselves to a couple of documents. One of a direct ancestor on one of these documents, an 1870s U.S. Census, a 1900s U.S. Census from Escambia County, Alabama, or on the 1900s census of Monroe County, Alabama. So in order to be enrolled into this tribe in 2008 and to be placed on these documents, you had to place yourself directly descended from somebody on one of those three very specific census records. This decision helped to stabilize the citizenship base, allowing that tribe to be better at managing their resources and their benefits and their governances and for their sovereignty. So, similar to the other tribes that I talked about, this had a specific cutoff date too. So, for the Dawes, it was 1907, with a few being added in 1914. This had that very specific cutoff. So you also have a lot of other caveats on this about enrollment that are very, very strict as well. So we'll talk about the enrollment criteria of each of these tribes here in a few minutes also. But you have to kind of understand those closure dates and what all of these things means to be able to help you. So you might find somebody that was like, hey, they were this tribe Native American, but they didn't make it onto the tribal roll because of the cutoff dates. That's possible. That is absolutely possible, and I have seen that. However, where Native Americans were so heavily documented, you just have to go to an earlier roll to look to see if they were on there. If you go to the earlier rolls and they're not there, then you kind of have an idea like, this might be a red flag. But if you go to an earlier roll, they weren't on the Dawes, but you found an earlier roll, say in 1851, that they're listed on that. Okay, you've got something here. They weren't enumerated on the federal enrollment rolls. So, talking about federal enrollment rolls and how important they are not just a genealogical record, but they're also a legal record. They were a record for different reasons for back then versus what they are for today. So, for today, it's more genealogical and claiming and also legal to be able to enroll into the tribe. But back then, it was for not only their citizenship, but their land claims, those allotments, and those other items that they got because of the forced removal, because they needed to be funded to make that trip. Those conductors had to be paid for each one of those people to feed them and to get them across the country to Indian Territory at that time. So that was another legal reason. They wanted to document who exactly was making that trip so they knew exactly who to compensate or to add onto the rolls later on. Those also are going to give you that determining for the current citizenship and your proof of ancestry. Yes, I am a citizen, but I had to prove myself. I had to go to those documents and say, I am a member of this tribe because I am the daughter of this person, the granddaughter of this person, the great granddaughter of this person. So that is why these are so important. They also preserve their tribal identity. So, like I said, they're preserving their names and their relationships, those communities in those different states where they had come from and where they ended up. So you know exactly where they came from, and those identities are preserved in these documents, even though they faced historical erasure. Like they were trying to erase where they had come from and keep them in this little teeny tiny area. And for legal political significance, like I had said, the land allotments, but not only land allotments, is going to be their treaty rights. Those settlements, all of these things, they were either included or excluded based on whether or not they were on this roll or not, or that roll or not, or this coming up roll, whatever it is. That is determining whether or not they got compensated or they got those treaty rights taken care of or any of that information. It had to be able to be on there. But research, you're here today because you guys are interested in research. Here, you wouldn't be here if you didn't understand the power of genealogy and documenting our ancestors. So here is a record to do that. This gives you the evidence to support your claim, whether you could be Native American or whether, oh, nope, I thought I was. We had this story and I found my family on census records versus not on the federal rolls for different tribes. It's giving you that full picture to build that native ancestry to prove it. It's giving that full picture to build upon, say, I've got this document and this document and this document to help you with all that. And then also cultural and historical insight. You're getting those DOS packets with the interviews and those affidavits of those friends or those neighbors or the people that married somebody, and you're getting community context in those packets with those interviews. You're seeing how some people actually lived. You're showing how they were adapting and how they resisted or how they engaged within that federal system during a very awful time in US history for them. This was not a good time. On top of some of these documents, if you go onto Ancestry and type in the 1937 Pioneer Papers, a lot of these information was actually documented within more interviews. So I'm going to say that again. It's on Ancestry. It's 1937 Pioneer Papers. And you, like I said, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of people being interviewed. And it's not just Native Americans. It was the people that went in for that land rush also, or their descendants of the people that were a part of that land rush, talking about what it was like living back there. And sometimes they talk about the historical cases that happened in history or the Tulsa issues that happened. Like they're talking about all kinds of things from their own mouth that was documented and interviewed, and it's been preserved for us to find and to read to learn more about our family. So that gives you that historical context or the cultural context in these types of documents. And I will always, always, always say this. Verify, 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 always, always, always verify. And I cannot stress this enough. It is so common, and I'm sure you guys have went through this in your research, finding somebody who looks like your ancestor. They have the same names, they're in the same age, they're in the same area, they live in the same county or the same town, whatever. Oh, this has to be my ancestor. And then you start documenting them and you put them in your tree, and then something just doesn't look right and it doesn't add up. Always, always, always verify your ancestor, especially in Native American, because that could make you so frustrated. If you found your ancestor on the Dawes roll, you know this is who your family is, and you belong to this, and you're trying to enroll for citizenship, and you get a letter, and you're excited, and you think you're accepted, and it's your tribal card, and you get a letter saying you're rejected because you're not a direct descendant of somebody on the Dawes, but wait, hey, I've got this paper. It says I'm related. This is my great great grandma. Like it has to be. So always verify your information, and here is a perfect example of this. This is a real life client that I had who went through that exact same thing. Some of his ancestors or some of his close family members were enrolled into the tribe, and some of them, including himself, they were rejected. But they were so confused. They were trying to enroll under the exact same ancestor, Willie Thompson. So I took a look at what was going on. He gave me his family tree, and I started to verify everything one step at a time. So like I told you in the beginning, where do you start? Start with yourself. So that's the first thing that I did is I started with him, proved him to his parents, proved his parents to his grandparents, and then so forth until I got to Willie Thompson. So the issue that I found is there were 129 individuals named Willie Thompson on the Dawes roll alone. This doesn't count any Willie Thompsons that might be on a census record that were part of the land rush or a descendant of somebody on that land rush that were white or an African American or maybe a freedman. It was just 129 individuals just with that name only on the Dawes roll. So I went through them piece by piece to see what the issue was, and there were three Willie Thompsons that this family was mistaking as their own. There were three different women in a very similar area, a very similar town, with the father's name that was exactly the same. So you can see where the confusion happened. One of them we could cross off the list immediately. They were freedmen. My client was not African American, he was white. So immediately I could knock that one off the list. If I couldn't have, she passed away when I believe she was 6 years old. So either way, she was eliminated. So now I have two. I have one on this US Census record for 1910. And I have one that was enrolled as a Cherokee citizen and was on the Dawes. When I looked at everything, I was able to determine that his ancestor was the white lady on the 1910 census and was not the lady that was on the Dawes roll. So, how did I do this? I looked at who was included in the household. I looked for Willie's marriage certificate. That's going to list her parents' name, hopefully, if we're lucky. I looked for Willie's obituary that lists her husband's name and any siblings or maybe some parents' information. In this case, it listed her siblings. I did the fan club research, so people around her. So I didn't just look at her. I looked at each one of her siblings individually, and I looked at her parents individually and to pull records from them to kind of confirm the household. So it was nailed down in like stone, like this is who it is. And for the census record, one of Willie's siblings had listed her by her married name, Mrs. Willie, and then her married name. So I was able to connect the dots that the 1910 Willie Thompson was my client's ancestor and he was not Native American, he was Caucasian, which she had a really cool story too that I was able to give him. And that the one that was on the Dawes roll was somebody just with the same name, same father's name, similar area, about the same age. And so we were able to verify all that information. So I always stress to always verify everything and look at everybody around this person to verify that this is your person. Some misconceptions that I often find is that DNA, do a DNA test. It's going to help you figure out everything. No, DNA test and any test that tells you that you are Native American is going to be fraud. If it tells you it's going to give you a tribe, absolutely not. Yes, Ancestry or 23andMe or MyHeritage is going to tell you that you're indigenous, but it's not going to tell you which tribe you come from. So anything that tells you that, please run away from that and don't do that. The DNA testing that I do recommend is these because it's going to tell you if you're indigenous or not. But like I said, it's never going to tell you that you are from a specific tribe or anything like that. The more important thing that it's also going to do is it's going to connect you to DNA matches to help point you in the right direction of where to search. So if you didn't know anything, you were adopted or you didn't know who your dad was, you have no idea where to start, a DNA test might help you so you can connect to those DNA matches. I'm going to also say that if you're a DNA match to somebody, does it necessarily mean that you're going to be from their tribe? So an example of this is me and my sister are half sisters. My mom's side's white, my dad's side's native. My maternal half sister, she's going to connect to me, and I'm native, but she's not. So always do your research and due diligence. And yes, they are telling you whether you are indigenous or not. So here is four different DNA tests from different types of indigenous. So you have a Choctaw, and you also have one at the end that is from Mexico. So her two paternal grandparents were from Mexico. So it's going to tell you pretty much in most of the time indigenous American North, or it's going to tell you Mexico, or it might give you something different. I also hear photos. Pictures are proof that I'm Native American, but no, it's not. Two of these people are white. They're from Eastern Europe and Germany primarily, and the rest are Native American. Did you guess right? These two individuals are not Native American. So you cannot tell by a photo. So I'm going to quickly go through these because we're starting to run out of time, but I'm going to go through the slides and show you what are the requirements for each tribe, and it's broken down by tribes that are federally recognized. So Cherokee, here are the three tribes that are Cherokee that you have to prove yourself. So Cherokee Nation, Oklahoma, Dawes Roll, United Keetoowah Band on that base roll that I told you about, and you must be 1/4 more blood quantum as determined by that base roll from 1949. Eastern Band of Cherokee, you must be 1/16 blood quantum or more and be direct descendant of that Baker roll. Chickasaw, you must be a direct descendant of somebody on that Dawes roll. Cherokee Nation and Chickasaw Nation, they don't require a blood quantum at all. Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, again, Dawes Roll with no blood quantum minimum. The Mississippi Band of Choctaw, you have to be direct descendant from somebody on that 1940s census roll, and be one half or more blood quantum. The Jenna Band of Choctaw, they are in Louisiana. You have to be a direct descendant from that 1995 tribal roll. And they also require a DNA test. They need you to prove yourself genetically from you to whoever you are claiming as your parents to be enrolled. Muskogee Creek Nation of Oklahoma, again, no blood quantum requirements, but you must be a direct descendant of that Dawes roll. I told you that Dawes roll was really important. That Poarch Creek Indians in Alabama, their enrollment is now closed, but in order to get enrolled, you have to be a direct descendant of somebody on that 2008 tribal roll, and you must try to enroll before your 21st birthday. If you try to enroll after, you don't get enrolled. You have to do this before your 21st birthday. And it's like I said, by that 1870s or 1900s special censuses. And you also must be one quarter more blood quantum to be able to be enrolled. Seminole Nation of Oklahoma, again, no blood quantum required, and you have to be a direct descendant of the Dawes. Seminole Tribe of Florida, you must be a direct descendant of the 1957 roll. You must be one quarter more a blood quantum, and you must be sponsored by a current citizen. Miccosukee tribe of Florida. You must be one half more blood quantum per that 1962 tribal constitution, and you have to enroll under your mother, and you must be approved by the general council. So if your dad is the one that's native, you can't enroll. Dual enrollment is not allowed because of federal policies, and their tribal constitutions are going to prohibit that because the tribes are getting federal funding, and you don't want to double dip. That's the best way to put it. It's going to jeopardize your tribal sovereignty and different benefits and the voting rights because you can't vote in two different tribes. So it's a conflict. You have to be able to, if you're Choctaw and you're Cherokee, depending on which side, you must pick which tribe you're going to enroll in. If you decide you want to do Choctaw and you're like, this isn't for me, I don't like the politics, you have to unenroll and then enroll into the other tribe. You cannot enroll into two tribes at the same time. Tribal population, this is a pie graph of the five civilized tribes and their tribal population today. And so at the end, I like to leave with what my fifth grade uncle had said. He led some of the Cherokees to Indian Territory under John Ross. So we are now to take our leave and kind farewell to our native land, the country the Great Spirit gave our fathers. We are on the eve of leaving that country that gave us birth. It is with sorrow that we are forced by the white man to quit the scenes of our childhood. Very powerful words. I have a couple of ebooks that I have on my website. They're only available on my website. If you use the coupon code SPEAKER, you get a discount. But there's three different ones: Navigating Pro Tools, Genetic Genealogy, a guide for beginners, and the Guide to Enrollment for the Five Civilized Tribes. Kind of what we went over today, but a little more in depth. And if you have any questions after this, feel free to email me. See me on Facebook. I post about 2 to 4 times every single day about some local history and some Native American history on there, just different stories. And there is my website also. So I have concluded. Sorry that I went over a little bit, but I am open for questions.
Thank you so much, Aimee,
You're
for
welcome.
an informative talk. I'm going to stop the recording now so that we can move on to the Q&A portion of the presentation. And if you're joining us on YouTube, thank you so much for watching our video. So let me stop the recording. And I believe